Good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you may be watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins, broadcasting from Merritt, British Columbia, here in the interior of British Columbia, south of the Rocky Mountains. And with me on the show is Bradley Watson from Watson Estates on YouTube here. His channel is to the left of him. Brad, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing fantastic. You know, I've been covering this housing market for a long time. And investors, I think, are in a really tight spot. I'm going to leave the floor to you. Tell us what comes to mind when anyone says, how's the housing market? What comes to mind first?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm as an expert as you. I know I see stuff on Australia. I learned today they're putting the interest rates up and stuff. I don't follow those markets as closely. But as far as Toronto, I can definitely say that we've been on a bit of a slide the last couple months. As far as prices go, especially in the higher end homes. Condos were on a bit of they were shooting up pretty quickly at quite an alarming rate because they were affordable, right, with the interest rate changes, and we can get into all that later. But yeah, I would say we're on a little bit of, it's quiet, right? Things are quiet, things are moving slower. I'm thinking this year is going to be very similar to last year. I don't think you have to go much further than what you saw last year to see what you're going to see this year. Unless things change internationally, which is where guys like you come in, right? Seeing what's going on around the world. But from a local perspective, we've got really good. We're in a good position as far as supply. So I mean, you can hear all the real estate jingle, right? Like we're in a generally strong market, same as Vancouver. But there's always hiccups that come along. So
okay, so I was reading a post from the Huffington Post, and they said that in Toronto, they are looking at right now a very frothy spring for sales. And usually springtime for sales is a big deal. So right now in the Southern Hemisphere, Australia and New Zealand just had their spring. And they had a very, very cold spring sales, big bargains and all this happening. And nobody was coming out for auctions in the Southern Hemisphere. What do you expect to be happening in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in Toronto?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because last year when we came through this spring, even in some of my video contents around that time, was trying to figure out when things would pick up, right? In fact, we had a really late spring, but last year, 2018, was easy to blame on the prior year because all the data was comparing against the crashing market, right? Because we were comparing against 2017. This year is interesting because now we're comparing it against a relatively, as much as you can, normal market. So I think you might find the stats show, if anything, if you're seeing bad stats, let me put it this way. If you're seeing bad stats in the spring, I would be concerned because the spring stats last year were low because of the comparison to the prior year. So it's almost like since what we saw in 2016 happened and the few years before that, it almost puts a dampening on the stats to see as far as numbers go. So I think this spring, I'm interested to see, I mean, generally you've got a 10% increase in prices in the spring, but when you compare spring to spring, I would say if the numbers are coming in 0 growth rate or less, I would be concerned getting into the summer market. But I would expect that because last year's numbers were a little funnier, spring would be okay. I don't know what's going south of the equator. We do things a little different, but it would be similar to Vancouver. Vancouver's got a higher they're in a higher end market, right? But it's also and in the same way from what I see going out and where you are, you've got this tale of two cities with the condo market and the low rise. Here is actually becoming very similar to that. We've seen condos going up almost 10%, whereas you got the high end 1.5 million plus going down almost 10%. So I mean, where's the middle? What are you looking for? So I would say for people who are in the Toronto market specifically, and I guess any market, you got to know what area you're dealing with, because it's very easy to just say we're going to go down or we're going to go up, but what's going down and what's going up really changes depending on where you're located, right?
Right, 100%. But let me tell you the tale of two cities, how this started in Toronto and why 2017 will remain and always be an anomaly is because once upon a time, the federal government, or sorry, the municipal and the government locally in Vancouver was sick and tired of the mass exodus of middle class Canadians. So they implemented the foreign buyers tax. Foreign buyers tax was implemented in Vancouver. Half the people went to Seattle, and the other half went to Toronto. The ones that went to Seattle did a little bit better than Toronto because Seattle was the hottest market in the United States since the foreign buyers tax was implemented in Vancouver. Seattle outgrew every other major city in the United States for condos, detached, townhomes, any other form, any vacant land. So now they're declining. They're down 5%. Seattle is now down 5 points from its high in from its ultimate high of February 2018. Now, Toronto saw that when a lot of investors came in and flooded the market, and Toronto's sitting on just around 97 to 100,000 empty units that was that they have registered or that they know is empty because there's no hookups. That's all the ones they get fined. Have you noticed? I read an article today. I don't know if you've seen it. It was put up about 40 minutes ago, and it says foreign investors are to blame for the housing slump in Vancouver. And I'm not saying that. I'm just reading what the title said. Right. I'm just reading the title right off, word for word, and that was from CTV News. Did you guys find that on your end of the market? What did you find?
Yeah, we got crushed by the foreign buyer tax too that hit Toronto. I'm waiting for the day we hear it's happening out in Montreal and that area over there. But we definitely got hit. We didn't get hit nearly the same as you guys, but we got hit. In fact, it's kind of why where I'm sitting now, my confidence on if the market does get shaken up, unless it's global on a local level, we've already taken a hit. So the changes are kind of slower than they were. Last year, we got hit big time. And I think a lot of that, I can't speak to Vancouver, but in Toronto, a lot of it is speculative, regardless of if there's a housing shortage. Because I'll tell you, when I look at condos for clients downtown Toronto, even now, it's still tough finding things.
Okay.
So you've got this really interesting sliding happening where there's less deals. People are nervous, so they're not putting their house on the market, which is driving that price. And I think back in when we had that same foreign buyer tax came in Toronto, a lot of people, first of all, saw what happened for the whole year in Vancouver and were petrified. But the other side of it is there's this kind of, you don't know if there's going to be a rush of supply come on the market. So I think a lot of it was speculative, but we haven't really picked up since. The only thing that picked up was that condo segment. So condos really launched the last year and a half, 2 years. I remember when I was talking to clients 5-6 years ago, condos could sit for 5 years and didn't even move for prices. And yet you had these freeholds going through the roof. It was a really fascinating time. And I mean, at that time, I'm thankful for guys like you that were talking about what was going on in the markets, because that's really where you see those opportunities, right? So if you knew 5 years ago, you would have seen that the condos weren't changing and the freeholds were, and all of a sudden you got these other adjustments that have come in with the OSFI guideline changes, the interest rate changes, several interest rate changes, not even keeping up with the states, but still getting hit, which is maybe where Seattle's getting beat up too. But yeah, and if you knew then, you would have seen that there was this kind of unique gap happening between the condo and the freehold, and now that's closed. So it'll be interesting to see when this year, because it will be this year. I'm pretty confident. I think we might already be nearing that point where someone will look at a condo that's say 600,000-700,000, and they're getting 500-600 square feet, and say, why wouldn't I get a starter level townhome?
Exactly.
Which isn't right. So wherever that crossover happens is where you're going to see people starting to jump the other way, and so it's this really interesting kind of hybrid going on. But as far as that, like what you're talking about, the foreign buyers, we don't have. In fact, I think it came out it was less than 5% or in around 5% foreign buyers in Toronto. So it wasn't nearly the same amount, but we got hit really hard still. So the speculation.
I think 5% is enough to shake up any market.
Sure. Well, we saw that clearly.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. Condo market always do well. It did well in Vancouver once the foreign buyers tax went in, and in Toronto once the foreign buyers tax get in, because of the fear of FOMO, fear of missing out. So a lot of the Canadian proper, like 2, second, third generation Canadians, want to jump into the market for the fear of not being able to own in their own country.
Right. True.
And that's what drove that market up super high. Now, You know what the Washington State implemented as a law for now
Yeah.
people for foreign investors. Oh, we're not going to put a foreign investors tax. What we're going to do is now when they arrive, they're going to have to declare where the money comes from. That's it. Sales went down. Kaboom. Because
Like just any spoken word of international is killing real estate markets. And the US is volatile. The
yeah,
US is extremely volatile right now.
but the thing is now in Washington State, if you lie, you know how it is in America. If you lie, they take everything you got.
Right.
If you lie at the border, so now a lot of investors aren't entering Washington State as much as they used to, and now with the capital outflows from China
Mhm.
and restricted outflows from China, there's not a lot of money leaving the country because they had a runoff on their wealth. Since the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, there was a huge runoff on wealth from China, and people wanted out of the country. Now, with the country doing this, what do you call that? That's kind of like a Facebook, but social credit score.
Social credit score.
Yeah, they have a social credit
Yeah,
score.
I've heard. I haven't followed China in the last few months, but I know
Okay,
they're trying to pull money back.
so they
I've
have a
heard.
social credit score. If you talk bad or you throw a cigarette butt on the floor,
That's crazy.
I hand to God, we've been covering it on my Mike in the Night. We've been
I have
covering
not
this on
heard
Mike in the
that,
Night,
but that's crazy.
and I
Yeah.
don't blame the Chinese for liquidating their assets and leaving.
No, for
If
sure.
if I was in that same predicament, I would have done the same thing. Right?
Even if you moved 5% of your assets, the cash is so high there that it you don't even have to be making a decision to move all your assets. If you're moving a bit of your assets, there's so much money pouring into countries like Canada are really small compared
Mm-hmm.
to them.
Yeah,
So
city-wise.
we feel it. Yeah, we feel it.
So now, what do you see in Q2 of 2019? I'd like to know what you're forecasting for Q2 because Q2 is spring. Q2 is everything. It's Q2 is basically the make or break for the real estate market.
Yeah. I think you're floating. I mean, I'm going to stick to the point. I think you're going to look very similar to 2017. Sorry, 2018. Wait, where are we now? We're in 2019.
Yep.
You're going to look like 2018. I think if you see growth, it's going to be very modest. Your high end segment is going to continue to slide. I would avoid the high end market like the plague right now. But if you're looking to get in the market, maybe a condo, like you said, they in the long term tend to do okay, especially because you're in the main city. But I like even me, I'm also an investor. I'm not throwing any money into this market. I've in the last few years, if you follow my content, you'll see I've started liquidating a lot of my properties and really just thanking God for the last few years that we've had, because I think right now it's you live there or you're generating a positive cash flow, which is another issue. It's very difficult to get a positive cash flow in the city right now. And a few years ago, people didn't care because the values were escalating so quickly, that the rent rate didn't matter. Now it matters because I did a quick survey in Mississauga actually. I live actually just kind of northwest of Toronto, but I was looking for the condo for a client, an international client looking at condos, and we found that I looked at all the condos I could possibly find, and there was out of all of them, which are hundreds, we found I think two that were a positive cash flow, and that was last year, a year and a half ago. So now I'm pretty confident in saying there's zero positive cash flow properties for the condo space in the single family. So unless you're buying something that you're going to live in, I'd hold on to your money,
Yeah.
with a game plan, right? Will there be a growth potentially? But it'll be modest. You're not going. There's no like at least from where I'm sitting there shouldn't be FOMO. If there's FOMO, then you're being played because it's not a time for FOMO. FOMO is a few years ago.
Yeah. Question. That was a really good perspective you gave us on that. It's honest. It's
Yeah.
true. What do you want to? What advice do you want to give to people that are right now underwater? Because there's quite a few people that have emailed me and written to me and told me that have been on the show that they're underwater. They owe more than what their property's worth.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. This is specific Canada or international?
Canada to Vancouver. Some people in Toronto,
And in
Oakville,
on their home or in investment properties.
just on their home. Period.
That's sad. I think the best thing you can do. I mean, let's pray that they didn't take on more than they could chew. I don't think interest rates will keep going up, which is great news. In fact, I actually 6 months ago, everyone was talking about how interest rates are going to keep skyrocketing and get a fixed mortgage, which would have been actually really funny for following that. And I'm sure a lot of people followed that advice. I actually, during that time, canceled a fixed mortgage, got a variable mortgage. I think mortgages are moving slowly, and you might as well take advantage of the potentially downward moving interest rates in the next few years. That's where I see it going. That's where I see the United States already talking about it, and I can see Canada following that. And with oil taking a hit, like we're really not much better off than the United States. So for people that are in that scenario, depending on their market, because I know there's parts of Canada that have been really hurting for a long time. Toronto has done relatively good. Like we're actually very lucky. But if you're living there, I would just be very intentional about paying down that mortgage while interest rates are slightly higher. I don't think they're high, but they're slightly higher. So I would be intentional. This is what I'm doing. I've got a variable mortgage, which I wouldn't encourage anyone unless you're in a strong position to go there. But if you could swing it, just start eating away at that mortgage and be very intentional about it, because I think in the next few years, depending on what happens in the U.S., we might even see properties keep going down. But at the same time, what's the alternative is rent. And when I look at rent rates in places like Toronto, I think the average rent in Toronto is like $2,200.
Wow.
Right, which is ridiculous, and it'll continue to go up. It's going to go up. I guarantee you. I think, like when we're talking, what are the price increases? Like we talk about real estate prices all the time, but rent, I think I would be shocked if rent didn't go up by double digits this year. I would be shocked.
Wow.
In the city.
So guys that are just tuning in, guys, I know this is a pre-recorded video, but this is Watson Estates, his YouTube channel. I'll leave a link in the bottom of the video. I got a few more questions for him, but I just want to plug his channel here a bit. Let's get him up to 500 subscribers, people. He's at 343 right now. Here's his channel here. I love his intro. His intro is the best. And he's got some pretty cool episodes here. Big Brother's watching real estate home. Tired of renting Airbnb? Try this third option. New mortgage stress test, the consequences, 2018 real estate predictions for Toronto, Canadian dollar going up, how to get rich in a cooling Toronto market. So he covers all aspects of the market, and he's hip, up to date, kind of wants to...
I'm young. You can say it.
Yeah, he wants to basically fit his customers. He wants to fit his customers with product that they're going to use or product that they actually really need, instead of just throwing anything at them. So you want to find a real estate agent like that that's going to be basically finding a product that you will potentially use for the rest of your life. Okay, so now, next question I wanted to ask you. Mass exodus from the GTA. It's happening. I've been hearing stories from a lot. Media's not covering. How many millennials, young, even retirees, moving to Cayuga, moving to Sudbury,
away.
Yeah. Do you see it happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sad part, the first thing that comes to mind that's sad is the transit. Our transit system in Toronto is ridiculous. So it's actually forcing us to be a commuter city. Now I know places like London have just skyrocketed because of that, and because there is talk of transit. So I think if I was talking to people that are doing this exodus, trying to find a place, if you're especially in the city, that has this potential for growth. I've heard of talk that they're going to connect a transit all the way out to Niagara and cross the border even. So try and play in those areas, but absolutely. Like I have clients that have downsized from Kitchener, and Kitchener is not even in the GTA. That's outskirts of Kitchener, but they're downsizing away and moving to places like Cayuga, right? Trying to get something for 100 to 150, which are out there, but they're far. And so if you work downtown, commuting is tricky. But if you're looking to live without a mortgage, what do you got to work for when you got no mortgage?
Yeah.
There are options. So, but it's happening too. Yep, it's definitely happening. And the transit only goes as far on one end as barely Hamilton. It doesn't even reach Hamilton. In fact, the GO train along the Lake Erie ends in Burlington. Out goes towards Oshawa on the other end, which Oshawa has probably got a lot of opportunity there in certain areas, but those homes aren't cheap either. I made $100,000. I invested out in Oshawa a few years back, thanks to guys like you and learning about alternative media and what's going on. not just what everyone's talking about. And I actually jumped out of that market within a couple months of the collapse happening in Toronto, and I made 100,000 after tax
That's
in that
good.
city with no upgrades. I just jumped in, rented it, and left in a year, and that place. So now, if you're looking at a 2 bedroom, let's say in South Oshawa, it's still 500,000 now. So it's expensive, but it's relatively cheap.
Uh, are you noticing from clients and friends and through colleagues that a lot of people not securing the financing to buy the property nowadays with all the stress testing and everything?
Yeah, yeah. I would say, I mean, right off the hop, when it first rolled out, I saw a drop of about 100 to 150 on the average home. But really, the material change that we see is a change from I wanted a detached, now I'm in a semi, or I wanted a semi, now I'm in a townhouse. And it just kind of shifted everyone one unit down as far as what they could afford. Fortunately, the market kind of helped, right? Because the market adjusted as the interest rates adjusted. There were deals finally available again. People were a little more desperate nowadays. I notice people are open to selling a house conditional on sale, which was I actually did a video on it when it happened because it was so fascinating. I had within 1 week, I had two or three that were okay with it all of a sudden, and no one would have even thought like. I mean, imagine Vancouver a few years ago, someone saying, "Oh, can you wait until I sell my house out in the country to move in?" There's no way. No one would have done that. Now it's happening all the time, all the time. I have to defend my clients and say we're not doing this because people are so tempted to take those offers.
Wow.
But yeah, there's been an affordability shift, and now it's over. Now, and that was when it first happened, which was in the low fours. The percentage it was qualified. Now it's over 5. So it's gotten only more tricky. But I think people have in the same way a few years ago, people accepted that home prices would never be within reach. Now they're becoming a little more in reach, or at least not growing in exponential ways. But now they're starting to recognize that interest rates could change, and so affordability could change. So it's a different book, but it's the same script. There's always going to be a challenge. Yeah.
Exactly. Realistically, do you see wages catching up now to affordability?
No. 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 Imagine we were having this conversation about New York a few years back, right? There's no way. So what I see happening as far as a trend goes, which is an interesting combination of what we talked about earlier, is people are going to start to trend towards renting. If you want to be in the city, you have to rent, which there's nothing wrong with renting if you've got a strategy and you've got a plan and there's no other option. Maybe you're making more money downtown Toronto and you justify it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'd love to sell you a house, but we also need to be realistic as far as where you're living and where you're working. But that combined with an increasing rent amount can pose a real challenge. So I think some of the moves that have happened, we had a Liberal government just come through in Ontario and just finished their term, and they had applied rent controls, which if
Yep.
anyone knows about rent controls, it actually has an adverse reaction. So rent skyrocketed under those rules, and now the government has stepped in and they've stopped it again. So now rent control has been removed, but damage is done, and and a lot of this is being played on that increasing on affordability. If I'm going to pay an extra 150 for my condo, I got to be able to rent it for at least another 150, 200. So what can I get? What can I squeeze? And you end up paying for that. So,
Have you seen any foreclosures?
not outside the norm. Not yet. I've seen, see, because the tricky thing here is a lot of the price declines have happened in the high end segment. So typically, unless if they were going to fall off, a lot of them have already, because you're not dealing with low income people qualifying for those even a few years back. So maybe they're holding on, and I haven't seen them come through, but I haven't seen power of sales happening outside of estate sales and your typical estate sales or financing, like not able to, just typical. I haven't seen an explosion of it. Could it happen? Possibly. But we tend to see, from what I'm noticing, people that are tighter, that are squeezing to get in the market, that are having parents help them, are in the lower end market, and they have that money. Really, they've got generational wealth backing them. The people that are taking the biggest hit have sat on real estate for 20 years and hopefully have equity. So I'm assuming that's why, but who knows what tomorrow's going to bring, right? It's hard to say. So
Yeah, no, I hear you. So, are you noticing less sales now are you selling less than when you maybe were in the 2017 peak
Yeah.
and then into the tail end of early 2018? Have you noticed a slowdown in your personal sales?
So it's funny you say that. Actually, so for me, last year was my best year. For me. But having interacted with other agents, for everyone else I talked to has gotten beat up from 2018. Now this year, because of my personal circumstances this month, I was actually staying home with my daughter, so I was a little bit slower for personal activity, but I've got listings rolling and activity happening. So I personally haven't noticed it, but if you ask the industry, and every circle of conversation and every realtor I've talked to has, and if you look at the numbers, we're seeing that, because when you see 5,000 less sales in a quarter or in a year, behind that is two transactions.
Yeah.
So that's 10,000 transactions. So there's no question that when the market's feeling the pain, the real estate business is also feeling the pain. So I guess the short answer is, as an industry, yeah, absolutely. And this year will continue, in my opinion, it will continue.
What else do I want to know? Well, tell us a bit about your channel. Plug yourself.
Okay, yeah, I've actually, so this would be my first collab. So I've been watching you for a while, so I'm really excited to be on your channel. I know we dialogue, but I've been doing this for a couple years, the videos, that is. So I try and put out a few minutes. I've been targeting my videos more on social media. So on my social media platform, which is called GTA Real Estate on Facebook.
Okay.
I get between 2 to 10,000 views per video. So I do really well there, but unfortunately my YouTube channel is getting these 2 or 3 minute clips. So I was just talking today about changing it up. I'm going to start to do longer YouTube videos, because what I'm doing is taking 20 minutes of content and slamming it down in 3 or 4 minutes. So unless you've got a pen and a notepad, you're not going to get into my videos. But if you want to get some serious info, there's a lot of content. And I'm hoping to start to bring out some longer content. But I've actually got, a few days ago, part of this whole collaborating with other great YouTubers is I'm actually in a race right now with my dad to get to 10,000 subs.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is step one.
Okay, you are at 343, and your angle is really good. I like the way you set up. You actually, for your vlogs, you put a lot more effort in your vlogs than I do in most of my vlogs. But when I'm here in my makeshift studio here, I make sure I try to make it the best I can. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to interviewing guests.
It's guys like you that get guys like me into this. So
yeah. So you got to get to 10,000 subs.
That's the goal. If I can get on 10,000 subs, then I'm bringing him on my channel. If not, I'm going to be on his channel. So that's the race. But anytime you put a competition in front of a Watson, there's bloodshed. So yeah. That's what I'm anticipating here. But yeah, it's a lot of my content is topical. So I mean, like the one I'm doing. So this was filmed a day early, but on Wednesday this week, I'm going to be talking about co-housing. So there's a little sneak peek for your viewers too. So I'm going to be uploading that at some point today when you're airing it. And we're going to be talking about how seniors are moving in with other seniors. So you've got couples with couples, and there's an article about that too, which I'm sure you've seen. So talking about how that kind of is set up, like how do you structure that? What does that look like? What does that mean? So those types of things that are a little bit deeper than just, surface. So.
We want to have you as a regular on the show once in a while, even on Trends in the Housing Market, have you come on live when you can.
Beautiful.
So Trends in the Housing Market kicks off Wednesday nights, Western Seaboard time at 7 p.m. So they'll be a little bit later for you. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
Baby's in bed. I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. As long as I'm not, hurting you time wise when it comes to getting things done at the house.
I post my videos on Wednesdays too. So Wednesdays is film day. So that's good.
Good. Okay. Well, last question.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to be asking this. When's a good time to buy? When do you tell the sideliners, the people that have been sidelining for the longest time, did not buy and are waiting to buy back in? Because
how long are we waiting? How long have we been waiting?
A lot of people have been waiting a long time, years now.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're buying a primary residence, save yourself the headache of renting. That was what I would say. Because renting is going to get harder, then the market is going to change. But if you're looking as an investor, I would wait until what happens in the States happens.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We'll wait. Well, we'll keep you on the pulse. You keep us on the pulse, and we'll get the green light from you when things look all free and clear, ready to go. When the market looks like it's stabilized.
Beautiful. Sounds good, my friend.
Thanks, Bradley. You have yourself a good night, and
Thank you,
we'll see each other soon.
All right. Have a good night, my friend.
Ciao. Adios.
Okay, bye.